So Senate Democrats launching a, quote, Social Security war room, saying that they have to protect the program from President Trump and Elon Musk. The White House says that it will not cut benefits, just waste, fraud, and abuse. Here's what one DOGE volunteer told Fox and Friends they're finding when they dig into the books at Social Security.
We were in Social Security looking for fraud, waste, and abuse. And to do that, we actually looked at the enumeration system, the system by which people get numbers in America. And we found that there were just about 5+ million of them that came to the country as illegals, were giving various forms of parole or allowed in the country, and then got through an automatic system, Social Security numbers. Just because we were curious, we then looked to see if they were on the voter rolls. And we found in a handful of cooperative states that there were thousands of them on the voter rolls, and that many of them had voted.
So let's begin by bringing in Delaware Democratic Senator Chris Coons. Senator, thank you very much for being here. So it's really very interesting to hear what they're finding when they look at Social Security. And we know that Social Security is going to become insolvent in just 10 years by 2035. Here's another one. Let's just play this, and then I want to get your reaction to both of these. This is also another member of the DOGE team from Bret Baier's special report discussion with them about what they were finding. Let's listen to this DOGE engineer on Social Security.
When you want to change your bank account, you can call Social Security. We learned 40% of the phone calls that they get are from fraudsters.
There are over 15 million people that are over the age of 120 that are marked as alive in the Social Security system.
And what we're trying to do is ensure that people do receive their benefits in the future. And you can only receive your benefits if the country is operating in a healthy and competent way.
Were you as shocked as I was when you heard some of those numbers, some of that information about how much fraud is happening in Social Security, Senator?
So, Martha, not only do I not believe some of what was just shared there, but the Trump administration's acting administrator of Social Security has said that less than 0.1% of the payments put out by the Social Security Administration are fraudulent or in error. Let's be clear about some of the things that were just played. There are people whose names are on the rolls as having been born 150 or 200 years ago. They're not receiving Social Security payments. So the statement that there's all these people, Martha,
yeah.
I'm just repeating back to you what the Trump administration, acting Social Security administrator, has said about the percentage of fraud in Social Security.
So let me ask you
Part
this.
of why I'm alarmed about Elon Musk and DOGE, and they're getting into the systems and they're getting the access to the individual information of millions of Americans, is that Elon Musk has made it clear he thinks Social Security is a Ponzi scheme. A Ponzi scheme is itself fraudulent, fake, criminal, or illegal. I don't think Social Security is a Ponzi scheme.
Well, let me ask you something.
I think 70 million Americans depend on it for their principal source of income.
That's too bad, because
so
in 10 years...
let me ask you a question,
Senator. Let me ask you a question. You've made a lot of points. Let me ask you something.
Other agencies, I think is immoral.
So you sound like you're pretty okay with all the agencies and how they function. So you say all those millions of people depend on Social Security, so you don't care about the ones that are going to never get it because it's going to be insolvent in 10 years. What have Democrats done? What did Joe Biden's administration do to find the waste, fraud, and abuse in Social Security to try to shore up this important agency? What did they do? Can you tell me?
Sure. So first, Martha, you are presuming widespread waste, fraud, and abuse in Social Security. You haven't offered any credible evidence to support that. I don't believe what DOGE says about virtually any federal agency. But I will believe what the GAO says, or the Inspector General, or the Administrator of Social Security. Because I've had senior folks from DOGE lie to my face about other federal agencies where they claim they have found widespread waste, fraud, and abuse, where previous audits did not find that waste, fraud, and abuse. And this administration, Martha, fired the Inspector General of USAID when he filed complaints about the waste of huge amounts of food aid left rotting on docks.
Let me ask you
Rather than dealing with that fraud, they fired him.
I'm amazed by, so you're saying that I'm assuming that there's waste, fraud, and abuse. And I think it's equally surprising that you are assuming that the government is functioning in an efficient way. When we all
That's not
know,
what I said. That's not what I said.
Well, then what has
Martha, there are inspector generals in every single agency that are
I
there
know.
to find waste, fraud, and abuse.
They've done a fantastic bang-up job. I mean, when you look at
And
the number...
to start the administration by firing all of them does not suggest a deep interest in listening to these career nonpartisan inspectors general about waste.
No, you can't just like put your fingers in your ear and go, you know, blah, blah, blah. Like it's not happening. We all know
that's not at all
that
what
the
I'm doing,
government
Martha.
is not
Let me repeat the point.
Run. And these
if
people...
Elon Musk says that Social Security is a Ponzi scheme, and this president has fired the relevant inspectors general, who are the people most capable, not a bunch of 20-year-old software engineers with no previous government experience.
People, did you watch this interview, Senator? Did you watch the interview? Did you watch this?
Accountants.
Did you watch the interview?
Which interview? I don't know what you're talking about.
The one I just
You're
played
yelling
you from.
so much.
No, I can't, because I can't get a word in edgewise. I'm trying to ask you a question. That's my job. So
you go right ahead.
There was an excellent panel on Special Report. These are not 25-year-old, you know, whatever people have been calling them. They're very seasoned executives who have made a lot of money and run good businesses efficiently, where they only use the number of people to get the job done that they needed. They gave up their livelihood and they left their families and they came to Washington to try to give their expertise to some of these agencies that are so sclerotic and wasteful that they are not able to function. So, okay, it would be great if, you know, if both sides of this, you know, because when I remember there being an active interest by Democrats in saying, you know what, we know that there's a lot of waste in our government. Now you're telling me there isn't.
That's not at all what I said. I said in Social Security, the current Trump administration acting Social Security administrator has said publicly less than 1/10% of the Social Security payments are being improvident, are not being sent to people who are entitled to them.
Let's assume that you are 100% right.
I agree with you that there is waste and fraud in different federal programs, and sign me up for working in a measured, bipartisan, thoughtful way about reducing. I mean, there are in Medicare,
well, you should talk to the people on the panel here, because I think you'd be pretty impressed with many of them. I would ask you respectfully to take a look at this panel discussion, because I found it very eye-opening. It's not a bunch of like nutty 25-year-olds, as you suggested. They're actually quite thoughtful, intelligent people who, you know, have a great record of. So let me ask you this. If it's been run so well and it's working well, Social Security, why is it going to run out of money in 10 years? The whole idea is that the investment
Martha, I think
would return.
You already know the answer to that.
What are you doing to make sure that it's solvent for your grandchildren and my grandchildren?
So, Martha, you already know the answer for why it is, at least in current accounting, proposed to be insolvent in 2035. That means it cannot pay the full benefits that those who have earned their way into Social Security beneficiary status are entitled to. That's because there are fewer people working and more people living longer than the model of the program provided for.
Yes, that's been true for quite some time.
It is an earned benefit, but like anything that is an earned benefit, there are actuarial tables that say we expect Chris Coons to live to 70.
No, it really would have been
but
nice if
instead,
somebody
people are living to 80.
Gotten to work
and
on
so
that
they are
several years ago.
receiving more payments than the program was modeled around. There's basically only 4 levers for fixing Social Security: raising how much of our income is taxed by Social Security, raising the age of eligibility.
None of what you're saying is a shock. None of it was a shock during the entire Biden administration.
That's right.
I never heard anybody say that they wanted to change this system or maybe make it slimmer or more efficient or get rid of the waste in order to make it last.
Rejected by Republicans to improve the solvency. Martha, the challenge is Democrats want to make 2 changes. Republicans want to make 2 changes. Each side doesn't like the other's changes. Raising the age of eligibility or raising how much of our income is taxed. For example, 2 simple things that would improve the solvency of Social Security for decades.
All right,
Democrats want to do one thing, Republicans want to do another.
Understood. I got to go, but I'm sure you agree that if someone is, I'm going to find out for you. I'm going to find out how many people are over the age of 120 and are getting checks. But if that were the case, you would obviously think that that would be considered waste, correct?
If they're alive and they're entitled to checks, they should be getting them.
Okay. All right. We will keep digging. I always
If they're
appreciate
alive.
you coming here.
Sure.
If they're alive.
Thanks, Martha.
Let's check on them and see if they're alive, and we'll get right back. Thank you very much, Senator. Always good to talk to you. Senator Chris Coons from Delaware.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.